Chapter 11. Solving the mystery of vaccination. Rather than continue to devote his energies to anthrax alone, Louis put that study aside for a time. He took up a different disease. First, however, he reviewed an important event in medical science. Dr. Edward Jenner discovered smallpox vaccinations in the late 1700s. For centuries, smallpox terrorized the whole world. Doctors dreaded outbreaks of the disease. It could kill as many as 1 out of 3 of those who fell victim to it. Smallpox left its mark on those who recovered. It caused miserable sores that left horrible pockmarks. Smallpox could also cause deafness or blindness. Those who did survive smallpox could count themselves fortunate in one way. They never fell victim to it again. For that reason, a very mild case of smallpox was better than none at all. Better to have a mild form of the disease and survive than to be forever afraid it might strike you next, people believed. About 100 years before the time of Louis Pasteur, Dr. Edward Jenner practiced medicine in the quiet English village of Berkeley. One day, a country girl told Dr. Jenner she didn't need to worry about smallpox. The girl worked as a milkmaid on a farm. "I've had cowpox," the girl explained. "It's a harmless disease, and it keeps me from getting smallpox." Dr. Jenner knew that cowpox was a mild disease, usually of cattle, although humans could get it too. Cowpox victims suffered from symptoms similar to those of smallpox, but on a much smaller scale. Cowpox left people unharmed. Dr. Jenner investigated. After years of careful study, he learned the true story. A certain type of cowpox at a certain time during its development could bestow protection from smallpox. As a test of this theory, he intentionally gave a young boy cowpox. Within a few days, the boy came down with cowpox. After he recovered, Dr. Jenner intentionally gave the boy smallpox. Jenner checked the boy daily. This time the boy didn't become sick. The mild case of cowpox protected him from even the strongest form of smallpox. Dr. Jenner invented the term vaccination to describe his new process. Vacca is the Latin word for cow. For 2 years, Dr. Jenner tried to interest doctors in his discovery. They wouldn't publish his results in the medical journals. They refused to let him speak before medical societies. They ignored his pleas to try his methods. "There is no way to prevent smallpox," doctors told Edward Jenner. As Louis Pasteur read about Dr. Jenner's trials, he paused in sympathy. Louis could understand the frustration the good doctor must have felt. Louis, too, often experienced the careless disregard some doctors showed for their patients. Louis, too, often had to prove his discoveries before a hostile group of scientists. Finally, Dr. Jenner wrote a book about his discovery. He published it himself. The book made an immediate sensation. Within 18 months, he vaccinated 12,000 people in London. Members of the British royal family volunteered for the treatment. In France, Napoleon Bonaparte ordered the vaccination of his soldiers. Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States, had himself and others in his family vaccinated. Louis Pasteur came back to this story time and again. He realized that vaccination might be a way to prevent other diseases. He always believed it better to avoid a disease entirely, rather than curing the disease once it struck. "When I think about a disease," he said, "I never think of finding a remedy for it. Instead, I search for a means to prevent it. Prevention is better than cure." How could cowpox make people immune to smallpox? Did other deadly diseases have weaker versions of themselves? As Louis puzzled about smallpox vaccinations, he tackled chicken cholera, a highly contagious disease of fowl. Chickens became listless when the disease struck. Their heads drooped, their feathers ruffled. Mother hens would stand motionless, allowing their little chicks to run this way and that without giving them any attention. Sitting hens would die without moving from the nest. During an epidemic, a farmer would be lucky if 1 in 12 of his chickens lived. Even before Louis began the study, scientists had found a bacteria that they believed caused the disease. Other scientists believed the bacteria grew only in living fowl. When sown in a non-living culture, the bacteria withered. Louis looked for a suitable culture for the bacteria. He tried the same medium that he'd used for anthrax germs. The chicken cholera germs became less active. They didn't reproduce. Slowly, the bacteria died out. Next, he tried a mixture that he'd used to grow yeast. This time, a solution actually killed the bacteria. Louis explained to his assistants, "A scientist cannot know beforehand what medium will best grow a particular bacteria. Liquids that serve as good homes to some bacteria are deadly to other bacteria. The bacteria grows only in the right medium. This explains why it will kill one type of animal but be harmless to another," Louis said. "In some animals, it will grow because the conditions are right for it. In others, it will not grow because the conditions do not suit its growth and development. It will be deadly to the first animal and harmless in the second." Louis knew that chicken cholera grew in the bodies of fowl. He made a broth of chicken gristle. In this medium, the chicken cholera bacteria thrived. Louis placed a drop of the broth on a crumb of bread. He fed it to a hen. Within a few hours after eating the crumb, the hen became weak. It staggered about. Its wings drooped and its feathers bristled. It appeared to go to sleep. Then, a few hours later, it died with a faint fluttering of its wings. The treated crumbs quickly killed even the healthiest hen. The bacteria did cause the disease. Each day, Louis took bacteria from an old chicken cholera culture and seeded a fresh culture with it. In this way, he had a steady supply of the deadly bacteria for his experiments. Louis wondered, will the bacteria cause the disease in mammals? He injected the bacteria into a guinea pig. The animal did get sick, but only slightly. That the sore formed on the skin where Louis injected the bacteria. The sore opened, and pus containing the bacteria oozed out. Chickens living in a barnyard with guinea pigs sometimes become ill and die for no apparent reason, Louis pointed out. However, if the farmer will look closely at his guinea pigs, he will find that they carry the disease. Imagine how many mysteries of contagious diseases might be solved as simply as this. About this time, Louis left the laboratory for his summer vacation. Unknown to Louis, Charles Chamberlain and Emile Roux took a vacation, too. They closed down the research laboratory, leaving the cultures in a cupboard. For several weeks during the summer of 1879, the bottles of chicken cholera stood unattended in the laboratory. Upon the return of Louis and his assistants in the early fall, they gave chickens some of the chicken cholera broth. They drew the sample from an old bottle that had been put aside and forgotten during the vacation. The chickens became sick but did not die. By the next morning, they seemed perfectly well again. The assistants discovered their mistake. They knew their error would irritate Louis. It was their fault the cultures had grown stale. They apologized to Louis Pasteur. "We didn't notice the date on the label," they said. "We'll have to pour out the old culture and grow afresh." Louis waved aside their explanation. He could sense that he was onto something. "The old bacteria gave the chickens a mild case of chicken cholera," Louis said. "What will happen if we give the same chickens a dose of fresh, strong chicken cholera bacteria?" Louis sent one of his assistants to the country to find a fresh strain of the bacteria. "Find a natural outbreak of the disease," Louis directed, "one which nearly always kills the victims." To another assistant, Louis said, "Go to the market and buy some new hens, ones we haven't experimented on before." When his assistants came back, Louis took the new, vicious culture and injected both groups of hens with it. He injected the hens from the market with it. He did the same for the laboratory hens that had survived the injection of the weakened bacteria. The next morning, he arrived at the laboratory an hour before anyone else. First, he looked in the cages with the hens from the market. As he expected, several of the hens had toppled over, dead of the disease. The birds from the market quickly died of the disease, proving that it was a strong, active culture. He turned to the hens that had survived the injection with the weakened bacteria. These hens did not even get sick. When his assistants came and they viewed the two groups of hens, utterly astonished. What had happened? Louis made one of those leaps of imagination only he seemed capable of making. "Don't you see?" he cried. "These birds have been vaccinated." During the weeks of standing exposed to the air, while Louis was away on vacation, the chicken cholera bacteria had grown weak. Louis now set off in full pursuit of this new discovery. He began putting aside the cultures for different intervals of time. He didn't transfer them to fresh broth each morning. As the germs aged, they lost their ability to kill the chickens. Instead, They gave the chickens immunity to chicken cholera. Louis eagerly summarized his results. When I inject hens with a culture only 1 day old, most of them die of the disease. If I inject them with a culture a few days old, then only half of them die. Finally, when I allow the culture to stand for a month or more, no hens die. Later, when I inject these hens with the strongest culture available, they remain immune to the disease. Edward Jenner had named his discovery vaccination, basing the word upon the Latin word for cow. Although Louis Pasteur's discovery had nothing to do with cows or cowpox, he used the same term in honor of Jenner's discovery. Just as vaccination with cowpox protected a person from smallpox, so vaccination with weakened chicken cholera bacteria protected chickens from chicken cholera. Lewis said, weakening the bacteria turns them against themselves. Now Lewis knew how to combat disease bacteria. He vaccinated the potential victim with weakened bacteria of the same disease. Lewis told the Academy of Medicine, an animal treated with a weakened bacteria gets a mild and harmless form of the disease. When I give the vaccine to a healthy animal, it causes the animal's body to develop an immunity to the disease. Then, when I expose the animal to the germ in its strongest form, the animal has a defense against the disease. Louis Pasteur could not have been happier during these days. Each discovery carried him toward his most important goal, a way to prevent diseases in humans. He could hardly sleep at nights because of the excitement. At the breakfast table, he would suddenly speak what was on his mind. He would exclaim, "What a benefit it would be if I could find other vaccines." At discussions with doctors who couldn't understand vaccination, he would grow more and more agitated. "Don't you see," he would cry, "what I did for chickens you can do for cattle, and even for humans." Doctors often didn't listen to Louis Pasteur's ideas. Instead, they focused upon the words and terms he used. If he used a medical expression slightly wrong, they would jump on these minor points. They tried to portray him as ignorant of medical matters. When the doctors ignored him, Louis talked directly to medical students. The students came to the Academy of Medicine to hear him speak. They sat in the seats open to the public. "Young men," Louis told them, "you who sit on those benches are the hope of the medical future of the country. Do not come here to seek the excitement of controversy. Come to learn the new medical methods." Vaccination is a spectacular example of the power of the experimental science. He believed the general public would share his excitement in the astonishing story of vaccination. He placed his reports in newspapers and magazines that ordinary people might read. Chicken cholera was itself a minor disease, since most farmers could afford to lose a few chickens to the disease. That was not the point. What worked for chicken cholera should also work for more important and dangerous diseases, even human ones. Lewis became convinced that he could produce vaccines for other diseases in the laboratory. He called his assistants together. He announced to them, "We'll go after anthrax next."